мы рядом сидим, да? Как я понял, здесь я сижу, да?
Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Recently we met on the framework of our foreign policy audit project, and we proceed with this big work. We try to be proactive, and today we have discussion about Ukrainian-Georgian relations. I think that this is extremely interesting these days when we expect to observe the elections in Georgia during this weekend. So my name is Daria Gaiday, and I'm Katerina Zasoba, and I would like to present our sponsors, the Black Sea Fund of Regional Cooperation by German Marshall Foundation. We have the among our support the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, a project of the German Marshall Fund. We have the Sweden Embassy among our sponsors, Renaissance Foundation, and Think Tank Fund. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Daria Gaiday, analyst of the Institute of World Policy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching us on stream. In course of my introduction to the paper produced by us, would be as follows. We try to analyze our relations with our neighbors as a country, and we found out that we do not have a lot of research, analytical material about relations with many of our neighbors, including Georgia. While in Georgia, the situation is quite opposite. In Georgia, they have several serious research and papers about relations with Ukraine. This brought us to the idea that we should develop more strategic thinking in terms of relations with our best neighbors, and we decided to rethink our bilateral relations with Georgia. The warm relations between Kiev and Tbilisi remained unchangeable for many years. Even when in Ukraine the political course changed in 2010, Georgia remained the partner of Ukraine, rather close partner of Ukraine. But I think both countries lack clear understanding about warm and friendly relations, and sometimes Ukraine is unable to formulate clearly its interests in relations with Georgia. So the first interest, common interest of both countries is support of territorial integrity. The next common interest between two countries is promotion and support of Euro-Atlantic integration. Also, we are interested in defense and security cooperation, strengthening economic relations, especially Ukrainian investments to Georgia. By the way, very limited Ukrainian investments to Georgia, I think is not most favorable element, despite all the favorable business climate in Georgia. By the way, good relations between Ukraine and Georgia are based on the foundation laid back in the Soviet Union. This is true about student exchanges, cultural times inherited from the Soviet Union, and now these relations are that old ties in terms of student exchange, etc. It will be weakened in the future because many students go abroad, not to Ukraine or to Georgia. The third expert is Georgia is becoming our trade rival, and Georgia had increased its transit potential, and now Ukraine needs to decide whether it wishes to become such a transit partner for Georgia. The next aspect is to share Georgian experience in terms of partially occupied territories. The Georgian interests to Ukraine in Ukraine were as follows. They were identified by Georgian politicians and experts. So Georgia is interested in Ukrainian support in the international fora, ensuring security in the Black Sea region. Georgia is very much interested in security in the Black Sea, and Ukraine is a big Black Sea country which might be involved to the discussions at NATO level devoted to the security in the Black Sea region. So Ukraine and Georgia can jointly formulate their position as to security in the Black Sea. Of course, Georgia is interested in enlarging the tourism amounts and exchanges between two countries. Now Ukraine takes 5th position. The tourism sector has a big potential, and it is not used. And Georgia is interested in Ukraine for development of its transit potential. In more detail, the challenges in relations between two countries due to the lack of strategic vision also exist. We lack strategic vision, and we lack also the operational goals. You can see this in our paper. Georgia and Ukraine started the Euro-Atlantic integration together, but today Georgia leads in reforming. Today Georgia is more advanced in terms of the Euro integration, and the package approach applied by two countries in the past is weakened because Georgia cannot wait for Ukraine when Ukraine would be able to resolve some of its domestic problems. Nevertheless, Georgia had always been the most coherent and advocate, the most devoted contributor to the this package approach, for example, in terms of signing the association agreement. So Ukraine now has to play its role. It's our turn to do our move, and Ukraine has to implement its reforms efficiently in order to be able to be a partner of Georgia in the international area. As for recommendations to overcome negative trends in relations between two countries, strengthening cooperation between Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova could strengthen their position in communicating with the EU and implementation of association agreement. Quite often we refer here to the experience of Visegrad 4, which united their efforts in integration and have some positive achievements in international arena. For Ukraine now, it is Georgian assistance is important in application of NATO students. The second is development of transit potential and development of soft force. For example, some time ago, Ukrainian school in Georgia was Ukrainian class was opened in Georgia, but now this class disappeared. When Ukrainian class was united with the Georgian, that Ukrainian language class disappeared, and this is a bright demonstration of the problems. The problems might be deepened in the future. I've got many questions, but I would like to give the floor to His Excellency, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Georgia to Ukraine. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mikheil Ukleba. Good afternoon, dear friends. I understand Ukrainian quite well, but I cannot speak good Ukrainian, so I will speak Russian.
Firstly, I would like to thank Institute of World Policy for the organization of this event, and Daria Gaiday also, that she prepared such an analysis, neutral, I would say, and this is important. And of course, this analysis faces the challenges, and a lot of factors depend on this and the development of the relationship of our countries. But we are not threatened by these challenges. And about Ukrainian and Georgian relationship, we, together with Mr. Klimkin, we on the 26th of September, we celebrated the anniversary of our diplomatic relationship, and we followed along the hard way, and we had 70 years of Soviet times, but this is all life, and Georgia underwent heavy way, and I would like to speak about positive things. Ukraine is a friendly and strategically important country for us, and for us, Ukraine is very important economic partner. I can cite some figures, statistics. Ukraine was at the 5th place, and when I came here as an ambassador, the turnover was 789 million, and then the trade turnover decreased, but as an ambassador, I would say that turnover was 515 million, and for Georgia this is big money, because you know that our territory's population is small, and for us 500 million is big money, and I believe that for Ukraine also it is big money. This is a big share. So I can tell you what was the share of yours and the turnover. 455 million the export. So this is an important area, and this year the trend is, it's rather difficult to say, but in 8 months we have more than $200 million of turnover, and the export of Ukraine is 244 million. So the figures show that economic relationship is really important, and also this is relationship among people. Tourism is on the rise, and Ukraine for the 4th year is at the 5th place. And this year, last year, during the year, we had 142,000 Ukrainian tourists, and in 8 months of this year we were visited by 138,000 visitors from Ukraine, and this is 26% more than during 8 months of last year, of 2015. So Ukraine is one of the leaders in the touristic sphere in Georgia, and Ukraine is at the 5th place after our neighbor. Of course, we are neighbors, but we are divided by the sea, and after Ukraine is at the 5th place, and we carry out active presentation of touristic opportunities in Kiev and in other cities. We have a lot of advertisement in the media, and also as an embassy we work in different oblasts and present our touristic opportunities, and different airlines travel. We have flight connections with Kiev, and in summer we have 6 or 7 flights a week. So this allows that people can come to us and to see our culture, our history. So people want to see everything by their own eyes, and we are not Switzerland, of course, but we try to improve our infrastructure, hotels, and firstly we had priority to have some brands, and in Batumi and Tbilisi and Bazhomi there were many hotels, and we have 2-star and 3-star hotels, and also we have winter resort, and it is on the rise, and Ukrainian tourists come to Georgia. And what about our relationship? So after these events, we witnessed Maidan and war, Crimea, Donbass. Of course, Georgia supported Ukraine, and the power and people of Georgia supported Ukraine, and this was the situation. Deja vu. Georgia, you know, yet 20% of Georgia is occupied at the moment, and you know that there is a wire and between the territories, and we have some observers that, and we are grateful to the European Union, because it is very important that international institutions, they see these provocations, these kidnappings. So, and even cemetery was divided by wiring, and we developed the mechanisms in more than 20 years. The war didn't start in 2008. The war between Russia and Georgia started long before this. This is, they just want to divide and rule. They just wanted to make conflict among small nations. And this solidarity, this understanding what is going on in Ukraine, we understand what is going on. For us, the situation is clear. Of course, Georgian experience, this negative experience, we know, but this is important experience. Problems with refugees, IDPs, communication with occupied territories and international format. You know that we have Geneva format and before, and it is important. In Abkhazia, there were representatives of UNO, and before the war of 2008, and OEC was in Skhin Valley, and after 2008, Russia. Now there is no representatives of international institutions, and all these, there are no monitors, no observers in the occupied territory, only at the line between the occupied and non-occupied territories. And Russia had 2 embassies in Sukhumi and in occupied Skhin Valley, and 1 section of interests of Georgia at the Embassy of Switzerland. And in Moscow, my deputy, he was transferred, and now he heads the sector of interests of Georgia at the Embassy of Switzerland in Moscow. And there is an Embassy of Abkhazia in Moscow, there is Plenipotentiary ambassador of Abkhazia, and South Ossetia ambassador there. So there are paradoxes, but we had 35 rounds of Geneva, and this is a process that is ongoing. EU, OEC, United States, UNO. So in such a format, it is going on. And of course, this is a difficult process, but parallel, we started negotiations because there is no such a thing as internal war. That's why we started with Russia, such a format, special envoy, special representative of the Prime Minister Zoraba Bashidze, very experienced person, and who was the ambassador to NATO and Benelux, and also Grigory Karasin. There are 2 representatives, and they started the dialogue, and it happens in Prague. There were several rounds of talks, and they are not speaking about red lines. So if occupied, not occupied, 3 embassies, so you can speak about it for a long time. So they do not touch this vulnerable issues, that they started to address some problems with transportation, trade, because you know that in 2004 and 2006 they didn't allow our people, didn't allow our products, so they searched for our kids, even at schools, and transport connection was stopped, and transport flights, they so there was a catastrophic situation. They brought people from there by planes, and what happened with wines, Georgian wines, and mineral waters, they banned them, and I was then ambassador to China, and 20 our companies in 3 weeks after we were extorted, we organized business forum in China, and Georgian company then started to export to China, and sometimes difficult situations help, and we were former Soviet republics, and the main partner was Russia for us, and everything was connected with their market, and it's also difficult for you because your main market was Russia, and we now export our wines and mineral waters to 42 countries, and we restored supply to Russia, and for 3 years passed, and 2008 6 years passed, 8 years passed, and our wines and mineral waters appeared in the market, and we became one of the 3 leaders in the market. You know, this is France, Italy, Chile, and Georgia. Despite this, people, they have special attitude to Georgia, and we are now in leading among 3 leaders in the market. So also air transportation was restored, and tourism is on the rise, and the Russians are at 4th place. They come to us because we have border with them, and also there is some wiring, some military trainings are going on in the region, and Russian military in South Ossetia, Skin Valley. It is not far from the capital of Georgia, so we have many challenges because of this. And this is about solidarity, of course, at all the levels. There were 2 topics when opposition and government agree that full European and Euro-Atlantic integration. They made a joint declaration, and also joint declaration on Ukraine. They agreed that they support Ukraine, and this is impressive. I'm sorry. So maybe we will speak about Georgian and the Ukrainian cooperation during the discussion, and I would like to give the floor to the next speaker. I would like to give the floor. We have 2 representatives of the government, and I would like to give the floor to Igor Roman, representative of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian view on these things.
First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation. I participated in your previous event.
And there are many other interesting countries that you can carry audit on. And we are representatives of the government, we are diplomats, and we should work in some framework. And we can speak about many things. And we all respect Mr. Ambassador, not only because he is the patriot of Georgia, but he is also a patriot of Ukrainian and Georgian relationship, and he greatly supports us. So I read your paper, and you have wonderful consultants that helped you in your work. So this work is comprehensive, interesting, actual. It was released before elections. You know about the situation in Georgia. It's rather difficult because elections is always struggle, and we hope that it will not cross red lines. And for us in Ukraine, it is important that the elections in Georgia were democratic and highly assessed by our Western partners, because every step of Georgia in the direction of European integration is a plus for Ukraine. And of course, our steps towards the European Union is always a plus for Georgia. So about the priorities at this stage of bilateral relationship. So time is pressing, so I will focus on some priorities. For me, I am a patriot of Ukraine, and I would like to state at this press briefing, I would like to start that political the most important is to preserve sovereignty and territorial integrity and counteract Russia. And in this relation, I would like to say that for me personally, and not only for me but for many people, new stage in bilateral cooperation was started in 2008.
You all know what happened in August 2008. At that time, I just came back from abroad, and I was suggested to contact the Black Sea, Ukrainian Black Sea Fleet contacts with the Russian Federation, and immediately I got the order to participate in the war against Georgia. There was the decree from August 13 and the order number 706. These were about Russian Black Sea Fleet ships. At that time, actually, every week we presented our protests to Russian Federation in terms of their movements of their fleet. Later, you know what happened in 2010. And unfortunately, we did not respond to all the Russian movements in terms of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, neither in 2003, neither nor in 2008. And today we have to unite our efforts with Georgian party and to recognize the aggressor as the aggressor. And actually, in brochure, you rightly mentioned our top priorities. I would like to thank today for to Georgia for their assistance in rehabilitation of our servicemen and of our children from the ATO zone. Also, I would like to mention that in 2015 we had active dialogue between two countries. Some weakening in relations happened in 2016, and the bitterness of sorrow which we experienced together, the bitterness of war, now we finalize the preparation to sign in important bilateral treaties. Omalan Minister of Infrastructure signed the agreement about Silk Route. Actually, our ministers of foreign affairs met this year. The presidents met this year. Also, the Minister of Infrastructure held negotiations about deep seaport in Anapa. For us, this is important geopolitical route leading to China. The government is supporting establishment of this work very intensively. We try to also try to maintain cultural relations. I used to work in Armenia for 4 years before 2008, and nevertheless, Armenia has a military base, Russia military base, and Tbilisi is located not far from it, and Georgia and Armenia have very powerful civil society. This is the potential which may deter any aggressor and once I heard from the journalist in Armenia. He told me, you followed the right path in history, while Russia is going back to the past and moving very rapidly. And I would like our civil societies to cooperate more closely, and I think that in this respect your work is a good factor. Unfortunately, we lack money for active representation in many countries of the world, including Georgia. And nevertheless, our ministry tries to support our embassy in Georgia, which has no ambassador. Unfortunately, we slightly lack money. We slightly lack money to transfer right ideas about Ukraine and Ukrainians, and to prevent any doubts in Ukraine and in the West. I would like you to convince to carry out the audit of Ukrainian relations with Armenia. I think that this might be very fruitful, and in Armenia, the civil society also believes that Russia is an aggressor. And while they would like to follow the civilizational path taken by Georgia, maybe you expected something different from me, but that is what I wish to say. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andriy Melnychuk, Deputy Director of International Cooperation Department from the Cabinet of Ministers.
Вимагаю особливо від уряду. Ми приводимо
I would like to describe what is required from the government. Currently, we are preparing to the session of the Intergovernmental Commission. We are preparing the economic projects for discussion at this commission, like infrastructure, like relations with the International Monetary Fund and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Black Sea countries. And I would like to encourage the authorities of both countries, business people of both countries to undertake more coordinated actions. Without economic projects, relations between Ukraine and Georgia would not develop. This is quite well understood by Kazakhstan, by Azerbaijan, by China, also, and due to that interest expressed by those countries, we should carry out a coordinated transportation policy in terms of tourists, in terms of turnover, etc. And I believe that in course of our future intergovernmental commission will be able to promote our cooperation. With this, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Marishvili, a leader of Ukrainian-Georgian Friendship Group. I had been listening very attentively to the representatives of both countries, and including our ambassador, and I would start with the statement that Crimea, Donbass, Lugansk, it's Ukraine, while Ossetia and Abkhazia are Georgia. Today we observe many positive developments in Ukraine, and I should say that we have very positive developments between two countries. And despite the positive developments in Ukraine, we should not object that there is the war, and the presence of aggressor creates many tensions in the country and in Ukraine and in Georgia. Actually, good relations between two countries had been very old, and I think that we will continue development of the relations. I agree that in developing these relations, we should promote economic relations. Nevertheless, what Mr. Ambassador mentioned, $500 million, it's much, actually. Actually, recently I visited Georgia, and I observed that there are a lot of Ukrainian goods in Georgian stores. I think that tourism, of course, is developing rather strongly. But what is bad? We do not have Ukrainian ambassador to Georgia. By the way, as an MP, I would like to mention the future elections in Georgia. The new parliament will be formed, and we will establish intra-parliamentary relations with the new parliament. And we are ready to contribute a lot of effort to the development of relations between two parliaments and two countries. I believe that Georgia is one of the the closest ally to of Ukraine. I'm a big patriot of Ukraine. I'm ready to give my life and blood for the well-being of Ukraine. But I recollect the times when Russian tanks were almost approaching to Tbilisi, and when President Yushchenko supported Georgia, expressed solidarity with Georgia, I recollect everything that was made by Ukraine for Georgia. Ukraine has Ukraine is surviving similar difficulties that Georgia survived several years ago. Actually, the aggressor applies similar scenarios. And I would like to say that we have a mutual understanding and a long-term friendship, which would allow us to continue our good traditions of friendship and cooperation on the way of our Euro integration. With this, I would like to give to thank to Ukrainian people. I believe that I'm a Georgian Ukrainian here in Ukraine. I spend a lot of time in Ukraine, and I know the sympathy existing between two nations. We hope that friendly relations would develop further, and we hope that ambassador would be appointed soon. The ambassador is very much needed. The representative of the state in neighboring countries is very much needed. Yesterday, children from ATO servicemen arrived back from Georgia. Our friendship should be strengthened. Our friendship should be transformed into economic or business space. The Black Sea relations and the position of two countries should be coordinated. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we have time for discussion and questions.
Rizalmayev, Eurasia Democracy Initiative, New York. I would like to address my question to our Georgian friends, to Mr. Ambassador. Do you agree with my assessment of political situation in Georgia, that all political forces, that they are at the same grounds, they have same position, except Nina Burjanadze party that is pro-Russian, and also the policy of Mikheil Saakashvili here in Ukraine. He says that Georgia now is more pro-Russian, but I don't agree with this. And what is your opinion on that? And about bilateral relationship between Georgia and Ukraine, the fact of Mikheil Saakashvili staying in Ukraine, how this influences the relationship. And in your report, Daria, it is said that Georgian government also have some suspicion because they see that they cooperate with their opponents here. And if Mikheil Saakashvili enters the government, then the relationship with between Georgia and Ukraine will drop. So also on the 27th of September in Georgia, the criminal case was started connected with some tapes that on some communication between Saakashvili and his team on some possible events in Georgia connected with some coup. I believe that we have joint position on Euro-Atlantic and Euro integration, and Stoltenberg came, and also Montenegro was also present as a member, and also Georgia is the candidate to NATO, and security in the Black Sea is very important. And after Bulgaria and Romania entered the European Union, so Black Sea is and in the Black Sea there is presence of Romania and Bulgaria, and associated members Georgia, Ukraine, and Turkey and Moldova. They are present, so this is a process, and Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria are members, and we are candidates. So this is a process in the region that is of importance, and the country continues to develop in this respect. As the second question, and also success. Georgia is ready to respond to the challenges. It is successful, and I can give you some materials about ratings of Georgia, starting from justice system, freedom house information, and last data, the indices on economic freedom, 50 think tanks. Georgia is at 9th place in this rating, and we are proud of it. And everything is said in this material, in this paper, about the improvements. This is daily work, government works, think tank and society, they cooperate, and this process is ongoing. So this is briefly about the situation. And as to the government, and also about Mikheil Saakashvili, it was not comfortable for Georgia, but we believe that this is a sovereign right of Ukraine, whether we like it or not. This is a sovereign right of Ukraine, and we understand that these are challenges that Ukraine face, and we see that Ukrainian and Georgian cooperation is really important, and we should see our strategic goals. So there are some moments. There is no ambassador. President Poroshenko visited in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan, but there wasn't. But our president was here twice. President of Parliament was also visiting Ukraine. So half of our government were in Ukraine. Healthcare Minister, Minister of Justice, and the European Integration Minister, and the Ministry of Agriculture. 8 or 9 ministers visited, and Sergenko was twice here, our Minister of Health. And as to solidarity, we support Ukraine a lot. Some wounded servicemen were treated and underwent rehabilitation. We had sad experience in Afghanistan, and a lot of people were wounded there, and they needed rehabilitation, and we have the experience in this field, and we help Ukraine. Also children, a lot of children travel to Georgia, and they have rest in Georgia. Also we provide humanitarian help to people from Georgia died in Maidan, and there were 6 of them, of them Ukrainian citizens of war, and 4 were in the ATO area and fought there. So of course there are many issues, but our relationship is strategic, and you know that in 2008, when in Bucharest there were sad events, but we adhered to our choice. Ukraine stopped its process on this field in this NATO direction, but we continued on this way, and the experience of Georgia is valuable for Ukraine. Our Minister of Justice made some presentations here at Justice, and there are a lot of positive things that are needed. There is sad experience, Geneva format, working with occupied territories, and so on and so forth. Of course, this experience is also valuable for Ukraine. Ukraine can get a lot from Georgia in terms of experience. I'm not speaking about transit lines. In Batumi, they signed maritime agreement, and the new agreement was signed on Eldesa, Lychevsk, Batumi transit line, and also this experience of Georgia is really important to what will come next. You saw what was before the war and after war, and you saw that the transit could be stopped, and you should forecast this. So China is also active toward Georgia, and we cooperate. So maybe this is diplomatic answer to your question. Thank you for understanding. Please, Daria, small comment. We analyzed the relationship with many countries, so comparison can be made. The problem is Ukrainian and Georgian relationship is not classic relationship between states. We have warm, friendly relationship between political elites of Georgia and Ukraine. Elites had great contact, and it is the continuation of Soviet tradition of contacts between elites. When personal contacts, being the representatives of Ukrainian state, they transfer the personal relationship on state relationship. So the recipe is, we shouldn't forget that there are strategic directions and priorities, there are interests of those states. And maybe there are, of course, personal contacts, and that should be outside official policies of the state. And if Ukraine has such strategic interests and purposes, then they will understand the strategic interests of the state, not only their personal relationship. So maybe there should be a classic format of a relationship, and that will be beneficial for both states. Thank you very much. Do we have questions? So we have time. I would like to ask and share my observations. So maybe we can compare. So many countries we reviewed in the framework of our audit. The key interest towards Ukraine is economic improvement, reforms, stability, and maybe Georgia is maybe the only country, the main interest of which is sovereignty. And we heard it in our interview, and I announced this will be Poland, and we will have interesting discussion on this. So going back to territorial integrity and sovereignty, I would like to ask our panelists, especially Mr. Ambassador, what can be lessons learned as to the dialogue with Russia. What would be the red lines, what should be done and should not be done in order to resolve this conflict?
When we come to the experience, you now have fighting, you have combats with Russia, while fortunately we do not have such a hot stage of fighting. Actually, now we have 4 countries in the world which recognize the so to say individual status of Ossetia and Abkhazia. Which it is very important that all the experts should not recognize the newly established territories which violate the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And I think it's Minsk process, Normandy 4, these are important formats for us to study. Today we have ambassador. I cooperate with the ambassador of Serbia. I cooperate with the ambassador of Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia. We are all the countries which have such, so to say, independent territories. 3 countries of Guam became associated, have association agreements with the EU. I think that we should strengthen our joint efforts. This is an important factor. Since we are leaders in the Eastern Partnership, our experience is very important for other countries. Our strategic goal is full integration to the EU. We wish to become full-fledged members. This is a long-term process. We should study experience of each other and do not, in order not to waste time for making similar mistakes. Thank you very much. Maybe you have questions or comments, Natalia. Thank you. My first question is to any of experts. What are expectations or forecasts as to the results of relations? And my second question is probably very uncomfortable for representatives of Georgia. I fully agree that Ukraine has much to share in Georgian experience. Now the question, why Georgia haven't made the use of positive experience in Ukraine as to the integration of formerly repatriated nations like Crimean Tatars, which successfully was carried out before occupation. And now Crimean Tatars remain the most pro-Ukrainian force in Crimea. And now policy of Georgia as to Meskhetian Turks in Georgia. How do you approach to this issue today, and whether you bring into your agenda? In course of our research, we reviewed the forecasts. We understood that political forces in Georgia have approximately equal support, and maybe Georgian Dream has more chances to form the government. There will be majoritarian candidates to the parliament, and maybe they will be in coalition with the Georgian Dream. Probably the government will be formed by this very political force. As for the question, for us, further democratization is important, and in course of this, current elections are very important. The previous elections were recognized as fair and democratic, and we hope that on October 8th we will have fair and transparent elections. By the way, in Kiev we have 2 polling stations, and Donetsk consular is in Kiev. We will have a polling station in his premises and in Georgian embassy. Unfortunately, it's a big tragedy. People who escaped from aggressor in Abkhazia and they moved to Donetsk and managed to restore their lives in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. Now they are IDPs again, and they had to escape from Donetsk. Of course, forecasts are different. The Georgian Dream, National Movement, New Democrats, Patriotic Alliance, the Labour parties, the Republicans. These are 7 major parties which have good perspectives. We cannot predict who will win. This will be a good test for Georgian people. They will have a chance to say the word here. And to your next question, in all international organizations, Georgia supports Ukraine. Out of 49 statements made in the EU, Georgia joined to 29 statements by Ukraine. Despite the fact that we have a huge pressure from Russian state, Russian tanks are deployed 40 kilometers from Tbilisi. And also Georgia joined the boycott of economic relations with Crimea. We have our own challenges, we have our own problems, and nevertheless we support Ukraine. Thank you. Answering a question about forecasts. Despite the fact that our embassy in Georgia is chaired by Chargé d'Affaires, but he is very proactive, and we have some predictions as to the parliamentary elections. At the parliamentary elections, we look from the point of view how many pro-Kremlin MPs might be elected, and we expect that something around 15 pro-Kremlin MPs might be elected. Also, we analyzed the content of mass media from the pro-Kremlin disinformation point of view. Russia tries to raise anti-Western attitudes, create myths and stereotypes against Euro-Atlantic integration. And imagine that 15 MPs will act on behalf of Georgian people in the capacity of members of parliament, and how beneficial this might be for Kremlin. I have a question to Igor. Today we several times heard about Guam countries, whether Ukraine has something in mind in terms of its participation in this organization, some specific measures. Of course, the Guam activities as planned, the Secretariat is working, but since our minister has very tough agenda, has rather tough schedule, and usually these are deputy ministers who maintain contacts in this organization. But the position of deputy minister in Guam is also vacant. We have the ambassador at large, which acts in the Guam organization on behalf of Ukraine. And we expect that on the framework of this organization, we will have the higher level forum at the level of ministers, of vice prime ministers. The Prime Minister of Ukraine initiated summit at the level of prime ministers of Guam, and we are now actively preparing this summit. Unfortunately, translators cannot hear the input to the mic. I would like to add, it's very important now in the United Nations, at the regular annual meeting, the vice prime ministers of Guam countries met together, and we encouraged Mr. Grossman to steer up activities in Guam, on Guam platform. We have a lot of joint issues where we can proactively cooperate, beginning with security and ending with cultural events. And I think it's very important that prime ministers of Guam countries should come together, and this will, I think, push up the activities of this organization considerably. Thank you very much. I have a very short question about Guam. Don't you think that this format lacks involvement of civil society? This might become an important support. Recently, we observed that Eastern Partnership Forum of Civil Society started to do something. Maybe civil society. Today we plan to have representatives of Guam countries, and I will transfer your message there. Guam is developing very actively. Probably you have a feeling that Guam is not existent, but we meet regularly on a monthly basis, and maybe here you are right, that civil society should be kept informed about all that activities. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants of today's discussion. To our speakers, we are open for further dialogue, and we are now preparing our final event, the Foreign Policy Forum in December, and we are open to all the comments and recommendations on our issued documents. On October 12th, we will have a discussion on Ukraine and China relations. Thank you.